Okay, we're live. Welcome to Dive into World Building, and I appear to be having some difficulties getting some of my regular attendees in this today, but we've got Kat with us here, and Larry should be back as soon as he gets a microphone, and I'm happy to see you. And today we're talking about working animals. Oh, first, before we start, I actually have a kind of exciting development that I have to kind of figure out, which is that I'm going to be holding this show live at BayCon in May. I'm going to be broadcasting it from a room at the convention. So I'm going to figure out how to get people into a room and try to get them included in a discussion, and it should be kind of cool and fun, and technical difficulties abound, but I have friends and we will figure it out. So that should be super fun. And yeah, anyway, if you guys have suggestions for topics or whatever, it would be very, very fun. Anyway, so, okay, so it looks like Morgan's going to be here in a minute. She's arguing with her headphones. So let's see, working animals. I mean, this came up last week, and I thought it was a really interesting topic because, I don't know, there are so many working animals, but I'm not sure that we're always thinking about them. So, you know, I mean, I think we have dogs. I guess the reason we got onto this, I think, was because we were talking about dogs and how they had been bred to do specific things. So I think that's probably a safe place to start. People bred dogs to go down holes after rabbits, and they bred dogs to, you know, run with carriages and protect them from wolves, and you know, dogs have been sort of mutated by human intervention for a very, very long time. And so that was kind of where I started. We also have the dogs who have this incredible energy because they need to be constantly herding, right? And if you don't let them herd something, they will herd your children, or herd the birds in the backyard, or, you know, yeah, it was a sort of an odd left turn from the whole mental illness thing.
This is what I missed by having tech problems. Now I understand.
Yeah, no, it was very interesting because, you know.
Wait, did I say that? Did I bring that
dogs
up?
gotta do what dogs gotta do. But so yeah, but we've got, you know, the skills and intelligence of dogs in terms of their abilities as working animals is, I mean, they're just amazing. And dogs have been human companions for thousands of years and have been tamed, and also, you know, they've had these different body types and skills sort of bred into them over the millennia, which I think is so. Yeah, I'm always amazed when I watch herding dogs, for example, just to see what they're capable of doing. Yeah, so okay, Morgan, come on, lay it on us. She's got a list. She's put it in the sidebar there, but I want her to read it out.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
Yay.
And an echo. Cattle dogs, sheep dogs, hunting dogs, badger dogs, wolfhounds. I guess hunting dogs are generally, I guess, the ones that accompany people to hunt, you know, boars or foxes or deer or whatever you're hunting. Badger dogs and the like will, I suppose they're supervised, but most humans don't go down into badger holes.
Right. Typically not. Yeah, and you know, like terriers who have those little low bodies and that incredible energy that go down holes after creatures. And Kat remarks that cats only have a single job description. Well, you know, it's funny. I think with cats, it's interesting. There have been quite a number of instances of fictional cats who behave more like dogs in terms of being able to be companion animals for humans. And I'm not thinking of specific instances, but I'm thinking of fantasies that I read as a kid where people had, you know, giant cats that go around with them.
Well, actually, this is jumping genres, but is there a dog equivalent to like the Cat Who stories, where the cats are solving mysteries?
Oh, that's
Mystery
interesting.
solving cats is a really big genre, and not just the one really famous eponymous series. But I think there are other cats and mysteries. I'm trying to think of dogs and mysteries, and you know, the Hound of the Baskervilles is not the same thing.
Are the gin and tonic books? Is one of the heroes of the gin and tonic books a dog? I want to say yes. And
Okay.
I have to look that up now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so there are a lot of things that animals can do to help us out, and I actually still back on dogs. I think it's worth remarking on the difference between sight hounds and scent hounds. Sight hounds are hunters, but they work with their eyes, and scent hounds are the ones that, you know, bay after a scent.
Well, so like retrievers versus bloodhounds.
Bloodhounds are definitely scent hounds, and retrievers, yeah. I mean, I guess, yeah, probably retrievers. They're also, I'm thinking of, shoot, I'm gonna have to go and see if Google can help me. There were sight hounds that were used, Salukis, the Persian Greyhound, and they're sight hounds, and they hunt by sight and speed. But yeah, right. So those are a very beautiful dog, and you know, some of them are extremely skilled and valuable. You know, I mean, any animal is very valuable if it is going to be working very hard for you, right? I am Laura Ann Gilman.
Yeah.
Righteous Set of Mysteries includes a detective dog and a detective cat, gin and tonic. Yeah. That's awesome.
Also, you know, humans, tagline, she's a dog person, he's a cat person. But of course, the dog and the cat are very important to the story.
Involved.
Actually, Dorena Durgan's Nose for Trouble, Danger. Okay. There are mysteries that include a veterinarian and a beagle. And the beagle's critical.
Well, I think it's interesting that mysteries have these companion animals in them. Yeah. Well, so I have to kind of divert us a little bit. I'm going to go back to what Kat was saying before we started the hangout, which is that she thought we should consider the dragons of Pern to be working animals.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I totally agree. I mean, they're genetically engineered and do a lot of very hard work, and they're essentially working animals, even though they're communicative working animals.
Why else would you saddle them and breed them?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I went off into Valdemar as well as a, you know, how far do we stretch that line of working animal?
Yeah. Well, I think actually the relationships between humans and animals are really interesting. I was actually speculating about pets, and I know this isn't quite the same as working animals, but we have pets, and you know, we dote on our pets, and we do all kinds of things with our pets, and yet we think of the idea of being someone's pet as very insulting. And I was kind of going, I wonder what it would be like to be to write a situation where a human was actually a pet or possibly like the equivalent of a working animal for an alien, and whether that would be acceptable under any conditions,
I'm pretty sure somebody's written that and then I've read it, but I can't remember any details so that we can look for it.
Well, if
I'm diverting
to know.
slightly into the fact that linguistically in English, we used to have more of a distinction between food and feed.
Mm-hmm.
But I grew up in a language where the distinction between fodder and feed and food is very, very distinct.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the verbs used theoretically could also be very, very distinct between persons and animals. And so where we assume the line should be is very different. And I remember the first time I heard somebody referring to their fur babies and talking about themselves as their companion animal's parent was quite startling to me. And now it's become very normalized. But
yeah, that's interesting.
Where do we draw these lines?
I think though that might be part of have something to do with the societal emphasis on the importance of having children, and people who choose not to have children sometimes have pets. And when you are told that there's something wrong with you, that you are not a nurturing person because you do not have children, you don't want children, but you do have animals that you do nurture, you do care for, that you might feel compelled to say, okay, look, these animals may not be your idea of family, but they're mine. And these are companion animals. They aren't ratters, they aren't herding dogs. This is my family. So deal with it. So that may be why some people refer to them as their fur babies or their fur children.
That's interesting. Well, it is interesting, and a companion animal. We don't usually think of pets as working animals, but there is the sort of foggy middle ground there, because pets can be working animals if they're, for example, service animals, which are very important. And then, of course, you get psychological service animals who are
emotional support animals.
Emotional support animals, right? Who are. I think that you have different steps along that continuum, I guess, where the working role of the animal is perhaps a little less clear, but it can be a very, very important role. So, I think that's interesting.
Yeah. A herding dog or a hunting dog, even if they live in your house when they're not working, what they do is very distinct from you.
Right.
A service dog, an emotional support animal, a guiding eyes, guiding ears, a dog that works very closely with you on a personal level, that's going to be harder to separate from you and emotionally. Whereas, in the same way that a human companion supporting you in some of those ways might be hard to separate from you, to say this person is not family, but they also might have their own distinct social group.
Yeah.
That does separate them from being. It does allow them maybe to separate.
Well, I guess it just depends on what their job is, right?
Yeah.
I just made a distinction when we were making the comparison to people in service between the nanny and the gardener.
Mm,
or
yeah.
the nanny and the cook or the chauffeur. There are different roles here, and people who are within the domestic sphere end up becoming more part of the family than the people who work
Right.
outside, even if they're in the same role of 24/7, you know, live in service.
Yeah. Yeah.
A house
Yeah.
is very important thing to have. It's the thing that protects you from the outside, from the weather, from outside people, from outside influences. It's it's more than a building. This is why, people try to sell homes instead of houses.
Well,
But
so let's move back to the animals, and maybe we could talk about um, horses.
Mm.
I mean, horses is a whole topic in and of itself. So we're not going to we're not going to dive
I
so
want to
deep
get back
into
to genre.
anything else. What? Sorry, Kit, Kat.
I want to get back to genre because I want to talk about the fact
Oh,
that it's wild to me that we have these stories that are rocket ships and all these other things, but somehow our deep love of horses leads us to bring horses into these worlds, whether it's practical or not. And we
mm,
have the entire, the existing issue of should should authors actually talk about the food and water needs of the working animals, because we barely talk about the food and water needs of the roving characters on their treks. But
yeah.
there have been people who've written these long things about the dietary needs of your horse and what exactly you'd have to be carrying in order to have these long things. And
Yeah, long voyages.
so I actually started writing a story that was about quasi-anthropomorphic high sentient cows and exactly how would cows handle being in space with dietary needs, and how much forage would you have to take, and could you actually have a ruminant cow in space?
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, you can
I
clearly have pigs in space, right?
well,
Hmm.
I didn't, well, their diet is very much like ours. I didn't have I didn't have a plot to hang on it, so I had trouble. I think I need to do one of those sort of Asimov's calculations, and let's talk about the calculations, sort of dry articles for this, but it's not really my my um my métier. So I just have a pile of notes talking about, how do you handle the methane of ruminant cows in space?
Well, you convert it to fuel.
Right. But how do you capture it?
So
Yeah.
so here's the question for that. Are you transporting them through space, or do they have a purpose for being, on your ship? I mean, a cat being on a ship, for on a spaceship, might be there for the same reason that a cat is on a seafaring ship,
Right.
which is, a cat's job, or one of the jobs that cats have, um, which is sort of a cooperation thing. But I don't know. Anyway, if your animal has a purpose in being on the spaceship and isn't just being transported, that I think that makes a difference.
Oh
Mhm.
no, I was actually doing if your sentient species was cow-based rather than monkey-based, what would
Oh
happen?
yeah, okay, yeah. If you're doing that way.
I actually was thinking very hard for a while about what it would be like if you had a sentient species based on sheep.
There you go.
And it's like, you kind of got to think things through differently, right? What would their cultural values be? And,
Well,
and
it's not just that. It's what kind of technology do you use when you're working with um,
Right.
hooves and not, you know, these
well,
things
yeah,
with
yes,
tentacles at the
no,
end.
yes and
Well,
no,
not tentacles,
because
but
frankly, the dexterity of goats cannot be underestimated.
that's true.
um,
Prehensile tongues are a thing.
yes, they are.
Yeah,
They are a thing. I
are
mean, there are
are
numerous
cows
ways to work around it if you wanted to.
are cows as dexterous, which is with
Well,
their
they
tongues and
would be
lips
by
as
the time
horses
you
are?
They would be by the time you made them spacefaring.
Yeah, but because I know horses. But horses are very uh, dexterous with their lips and their tongues.
Yeah, their lips are pretty skilled, right?
And they're smart. They're they unlatch bins and gates and throw buckets at people.
Oh no. I have plot bunnies for dwarf spacefaring elephants now.
Well, of course, you have Lawrence Schoen's Barsk novels, which are about tree-dwelling elephants.
Right.
But anyway, we're a little off the topic right now.
Working
Service animals.
So all I'll say is I don't see why you can't take an animal base and vary it a lot. And you can vary it a lot physiologically as well as in other ways, right? I mean, if we're going to go as far as making them sentient, we can change the configuration of their hands a little bit, or that sort of thing.
All you have to do is look at the underlying skeleton.
Yeah.
Are we back to cats with opposable thumbs then?
Oh my God. Cats with thumbs and wings.
Wait, no, we were talking about service animal horror. Now we've got companion animal horror.
Oh no, it wasn't. It's
I'm kidding.
yeah, actually that is kind of
Okay, so
I have a question. As in genre, okay, so there are people in contemporary thinking right now who are wrestling with the issue of sovereignty and human interactions with animals.
mm-hmm. Yep.
And we don't need to go down that particular line, but when we're talking about genre, we are talking about possibly the possibility of, if you're not exclusively using terrestrial animals, then you're talking about, alien animals. What is the line between enslavement and colonialism and having a service animal or a working animal? So there's an ethical conundrum that I'm not clear how you navigate when we don't have protocols for determining consent.
Yeah, well, I mean, so I guess the other factor that might be interesting in terms of that sort of thing is that we've co-evolved with most of our working animals. And they've changed us and we've changed them. And we can say, well, we've changed them a lot more, but they have changed us. And you can go out and find articles on how our relationship with horses changed us and how our relationship with dogs changed us. It's very interesting stuff. I mean, it's subtle, but it's there. If you head out and you head off to some alien planet where you don't have these millennia of interaction and coevolution with animals, right? Is it safe to assume that you could actually develop a working animal relationship with an animal under those circumstances? Okay, Kat, that's awesome. Okay, so Kat just put in the sidebar that the worms of Dune were working animals. Yeah, sure. I don't think that they were very.
I think I'm stretching the definition really hard because.
Well,
no.
Are honeybees working animals?
Yeah.
Because any working animal that we have, we didn't invent out of nowhere. We looked at an animal in the environment and said, the thing that animal is doing could be useful to me if guided, if structured, or if we change just a little bit or convince them to do what we want with that skill. Um, you know, so
Honeybees,
you
right?
breed them and train them, and so yeah, that's a working animal, or could become a working animal if you could do it without, you know, dying, which I guess some of them do, um, yeah, and we don't invent them out of the blue. We look around and adapt what's in our environment, which, you know, make it harder to go someplace with it, if we don't have the millennia of uh, evolution of cooperation.
Honeybees.
Mm.
That's a really interesting one. Yeah. I mean, so I guess one of the questions here is that if you're going to be working with a working animal, how do you define that relationship, right? I mean, we imagine our relationships with dogs and horses as being very personal, right? Our relationship with honeybees is not super personal, right? Because we don't have mammalian things in common with them, I guess, right? But that doesn't mean they don't work for us and that we can't provide good environments for them to help them do what we need them to do. So, yeah. Kat, why don't you tell us about sugar ants?
Sorry.
I want this to be auditory so that people who are watching the video can actually enjoy it.
So honeybees led me to sugar ants, and they're species of ants that collect nectar in the same way that bees do, but they store them in their posterior, I guess in their gut, but it gives them a really rounded last segment. And I am told that there are people who have traditionally harvested and eaten them because they're a great source of concentrated sweetness.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
Which is it differs from honeybees in that they're food animals rather than working animals.
Well, you
Yeah,
know,
it seems like they would be more food animals than working animals.
I mean,
pig
cattle
and
are
chicken
also food
problems, right?
animals. Oh,
Sorry?
Is an egg-laying chicken a food a working
Food
animal or a food
or
animal?
or a
yeah.
working animal? Woo, yeah.
Are dairy cows working animals or food animals? I'm sure that
Yeah.
somebody who was more invested in an animal husbandry farming background would be falling on the floor laughing at me because I'm probably making city slicker muddle out of things that are possibly clearer from that context. But you know,
Yeah,
as long as we're
probably.
talking about consumed or producing,
they should feel free to chime in, or
Well, but you know what? You do have
commented
plenty of people who keep chickens as pets.
yeah.
And oh, they happen to lay eggs. That's nice too.
well, you know, I think that there are always these stories. I think even in mythology, there's stories about sentry birds, right? Aren't there geese that were lauded for calling the alarm on an attack into a settlement of some sort?
Mm.
And so,
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
Roosters are working animals.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You know, and we have sheep. So I'm not clear what the lines are, but I'm also looking at the distinction between animals being used for their abilities versus animals being used for protein or yeah, where and so that's where my honeybees and chickens and line comes from, and dairy cows comes from, because I'm no longer clear. And then I'm like, okay, what if we scale back from there and we only say actions versus product versus flesh?
No, but I don't think that. I mean, these relationships, I think, are multi-variable and they are complicated, right? I mean, I'm thinking about, for example, there is a huge herd of goats that is used. They're used as working animals in California. And
Lawn mowing goats.
yes, they are. They are not just lawn mowing goats, in fact, but they are anti-fire goats.
Right.
So they let them loose on a hillside, and the goats just chew up everything they can see. And at the same time that they are becoming larger goats, they are also clearing out brush and clearing out things like poison oak,
Right.
because they actually will eat poison oak, which, poison oak in this area is really hard to get rid of because you can't do anything with it, really.
Yeah, unless you're a goat.
Unless you're a goat, right? I think deer can eat it also, but that's not something that we're in charge of. So I think it's really interesting that, in fact, the parks will hire these goats to go and do their thing, and the wilderness areas will get the goats and put them into a very particular area, and
So why do we work with goats and not deer? They're both mammals. They're both herd animals. They both eat everything.
So, actually, I can
Well,
answer that.
Goats. Okay.
So there's a horses versus zebras issue, not just in the medical science, think horses, not zebras, but the fact that zebras are much, much harder to domesticate. We spent many millennia domesticating horses, but in the most natural wild state, there are differences in animals that in their herd behaviors and in their individual behaviors that make them more or less amenable to being penned up or guided by, catching one charismatic animal and having them lead the rest, and all of these other intrinsic behaviors of the animals. And so deer, because they jump over things, goats are climbers, deer are jumpers.
yes.
And so penning deer is much more difficult. And if you try to pen a deer with high enough walls, you can end up with an animal that just attempts to escape in ways that just make themselves bash into walls and things.
Yeah.
And
Some animals just are not conducive to taming.
And their various attack and defense characteristics of an animal can lead to them being easier or harder for humans to control. So there's some really interesting articles. I think Jared Diamond references them. I do not remember off the top of my head right now, but talking about why various animals around the world, various large fauna, did or did not get domesticated.
Yeah.
Some of the smaller scale examples of this are like the difference between hares and rabbits, which are not important to us as urban dwellers or suburban dwellers, but from a behavioral standpoint was a really important distinction for people who wanted to domesticate rabbits.
Yeah.
Hares are not amenable to being domesticated because of their behavioral differences from rabbits.
Yeah.
So for the rest of us, they're just, very similar lagomorphs with the long hair and the teeth and hop, hop, hop. But if you're trying to domesticate them, what's important is
Yeah.
do they burrow? Do they not burrow? What are they comfortable with? So why do we domesticate chickens and not other animals?
Right. And I thought of some more. I thought of some more working animals. Sorry, I just thought of donkeys and llamas.
Yes. Oh yes, yes.
Who are used as guards. And sorry, like when I'm in a topic like this, I want to try to see if I can find all the corners of the topic.
We were talking about. We were talking about humans being used as working animals by other species, by aliens, and I think it was just a Tumblr thread discussion, but there was the whole thing about humans being really useful because of our inherent characteristics of like, what was it, community building and being sort of ludicrously willing to go into danger situations and our fingers and wanting to like open things and these things being useful to some other species
Yeah.
of aliens, and all the aliens talking about each other about, well, yeah, you want one, you know, service human on your ship, but you don't want more than that because kind of stories.
Yeah.
But now I'm also thinking about the animals that we used to harvest from for perfumes,
Mm.
and wondering if, you know, I can envision an alien story where our human exudates would be exotic and pleasing too.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And, you know, I'm envisioning one of these down on your luck spacer stories where the guy's like, yeah, I'm reduced to selling my earwax kind of story.
Okay, I want you to write that now, Kat. Yeah, it is interesting. Well, if you don't mind me going back to the llamas and the donkeys just for a second,
Yeah.
the llamas are used to guard the goats at this goat farm that we've been to.
Oh, right.
Huh.
Llamas are very they like to guard. They're
Yeah.
strong. They're very big, and they are don't mess with them basically. And if they have adopted you as their family member, then
Right.
you are in good shape. And so, in fact, in this is in the town of Pescadero that we saw llamas being used as guard animals for goats. They're guarding the dairy goats
Right.
for this goat dairy that we go to visit. And what they're guarding them from is coyotes and mountain lions,
Right.
which is
Yeah.
interesting.
Well, also because the animals that they're guarding against are really at the right height for a well-aimed llama kick to be really, really lethal.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Between that and their projectile spit.
Yeah. Well, and so interestingly, the donkey that we saw that had the job of guarding was guarding ducks.
Foie
Yeah.
gras ducks?
Yes.
Ducks?
Foie gras ducks. I am not kidding. This was at a farm that we visited in France.
Yeah.
And it was very, very interesting. One of the things that they would do at this farm was when it was time to fatten up the ducks, they would move them into a chilled barn
Right.
so that the ducks would think it was autumn and it was time to fatten up for winter,
Right.
which I thought was interesting and a bit more humane than stuffing things down their throats. But, I mean, they're still foie gras ducks, right? But what I thought was interesting about the donkey, though, was the donkey was to guard from foxes.
Right.
And again, it's the height of the foot, right? But donkeys are also very, oh, yes, thanks, Larry. Pigs finding truffles. We'll get to that in a second. The donkeys were very protective of the ducks. They were perfectly fine, didn't worry them that these were not mammals or whatever. They were perfectly fine with guarding them. And they were guarding against foxes, and so I'm sure there was a hoof height to animal predator height right. thing going on as well there. Yes, so thanks, Larry, for mentioning pigs finding truffles. That's a fun one.
Yummy.
Yummy. Hey, you have your microphone. That's great.
Yay.
Cool.
So actually, and you know what? Pigs finding truffles. I was just thinking, like, how do you get the pig not to eat the truffle? But maybe they're not interested in eating the truffle. They've just been trained to find them.
Oh no, they are. You have to work very hard at dragging the pig off the truffle once you figured out that the pig has scented on the truffle, and you get for where the truffles are. Then you have to away, or they will eat the truffle.
Okay. Thanks for that.
How do you keep a retriever from eating the duck you're sending it to retrieve? Can pigs
train it? I guess.
Yeah. So I guess if You can persuade, pigs are smart. If you can persuade the pig that they'll be happier leaving the truffle be, and you'll give them something nice
Right.
later. I don't know. That may be a behavioral thing as well.
Mm-hmm.
I recall reading a story sort of saying that dogs were preferable because the dogs would just find the truffles as the pigs, but the pigs would eat the truffles.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's interesting. I suppose you could train a pig to
So-
find a truffle. That is interesting, though.
Certainly the pigs were sort of natively interested in the truffles.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, pigs are very smart. So, the other thing that this made me think of actually was cormorants fishing. And we went actually to watch that being done in a sort of display fashion on a river in Kyoto some years ago. And they had, they have the rings around the cormorants' necks, and they basically, when we watched it, they had the cormorants on leashes made out of rice straw. And the cormorants would dive in, grab fish, and then whenever they saw one had a fish, they'd reel it in and yank the fish out of its mouth. It was very dramatic and kind of disturbing to watch, I guess, if you've never seen that sort of thing before.
I'm thinking suddenly about all the different ways we have of catching fish.
Yeah.
And sort of fictional, even weirder ways of catching fish. Pick for another week.
Okay, I'm writing down that link for you, Morgan.
I want to kind of in genre think about the possibility of, as humans, we're very precious, and they're very, they are we can all agree that the moment they are actually to them to be lives. I'm thinking about what happens if you have a reproductive system like a fish. You're like the offspring in a future where there weren't natural predators, number of offspring, so that I'm trying to imagine sort of setting up the ethical. As humans, we would be aghast where another is done.
Yeah, I didn't get all of that, but it sounded very interesting, the parts of it that I heard.
We've gone boingy.
Sometimes that happens. Morgan mentioned falconry.
Ah.
And I think that's interesting. But maybe we have expired our technical success.
Yeah, it looks like, because Che came in and left immediately, and Kat seems to be gone.
I'm glad you mentioned falconry, though. That's always a cool one.
Yeah,
and it works with
also
a lot of different types of birds, like falcons and eagles and.
And that does turn up in fantasy.
Yes, it does too. And I think, in fact, it has to do with the connection with the medieval falconry. Just because a lot of characteristics of medieval life ended up in fantasy. And it's funny because, in fact, I can see some parallels between falconry and the fire lizards of.
Mm-hmm.
They're not the size of the dragons. They're small, but they have a lot of the characteristics of falcons as a result of that. So she does treat them quite a bit like falcons.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, you know what? It looks like we are almost out of time, and we appear to be having some technical problems. So perhaps we should stop the broadcast at this point. Larry, thank you for being so patient. I'm sorry that we weren't able to get you fully hooked in, but I did find your contributions very helpful. So you're welcome to come back anytime. And here's Kat. So I'm going to
back.
Hi, Kat. We're about to end the show. Next week we have a guest author. Megan O'Keefe will be here. She's been on the show once before talking about her her novel Steal the Sky. And so now she has 2 more books in that series. And so we're going to talk about how the world has developed, and that kind of thing should be super fun. And I think I'm going to stop the broadcast. All right, we'll see you next week.